Welcome to the Eversio Experience podcast. I'm Brandy Garden, the co-founder here at Eversio Wellness, and I'm here with my co-host, Dr. Desiree Caruso, naturopathic physician.
Mushrooms are symbols of interconnectedness, and we're so excited to connect you with the health, wellness, and wisdom that they have brought us on our journey to this moment. We believe mushrooms are critical to the maintenance of our physical well-being and our collective mental health.
Yes, our ancestors had deep cultural connections to mushrooms, but today they remain understudied, undervalued, and often misunderstood by much of modern society, and we are here to change that. Eversio means change, and it's our mission to change lives through fungi.
There's a mushroom for every moment.
And we're so glad that you're here to share this moment with us. And now, let's dive into the episode.
Hey everyone, welcome back. I want to start by speaking directly to the person listening who feels exhausted in a way that sleep doesn't really fix. The person who is doing all the right things, you're trying to eat well, you're trying to rest, trying to cut back on caffeine, but you still feel wired, foggy, and depleted.
And especially the woman in perimenopause who right now is thinking, why does my body feel so unfamiliar to me all of the sudden? I know it feels like you're more tired, like your sleep is lighter or your sleep is broken. Hello, waking up at 3 a.m. to go pee. Your nervous system feels kind of, I've heard women describe it as jumpy, and your resilience just isn't what it used to be, which is why this year I chose resilience as my word of the year.
So if those things resonate with you, I think this episode is just for you. Because what you're experiencing isn't a personal failure, and I think we've been conditioned by society to think that we need to do more in this state. But actually, this is a physiological transition. So today we're going to talk about burnout, energy, sleep, and we want to talk about one particular functional mushroom that seems to keep showing up in the research for people who are in this season of life, and it is lion's mane. There's no denying that lion's mane can't help with all of these things.
And I love that we're bringing it back to lion's mane. You all know it was my first love of a mushroom. And I think what's interesting to me is the research has not stopped. And as we see more research, I'm understanding more of why it worked so well for me in the beginning, even though I was not taking lion's mane to help prevent symptoms of perimenopause or menopause. I was taking lion's mane for brain health. But as I see what has happened for me over these past 5 or 6 years of really consuming a therapeutic dose of lion's mane almost every day, I have learned that it has been one of the biggest changers for me, because perimenopause is a nervous system transition, right? Hormonal shifts impact our neurotransmitters, which is all I was after, and also impacts stress hormones and your sleep architecture and your emotional resilience. And it does this all at the same time. It's not one thing.
And then we add in a layer of modern life on top of that,
Yes.
right? Caregiving. Maybe you are in the sandwich generation where you're taking care of kids and you're also taking care of your parents, or maybe you're just involved and intertwined with your family where there is an increased level of caregiving. Maybe work. There are a lot of working parents, working moms, more so now than there ever has been throughout history. And not only that, the mental load. Brandy, you and I talk about mental load all the time. And so the body often enters what we now call burnout. Yeah. Everybody has heard the term burnout, and same with brain fog. And burnout used to be called this term called neurasthenia or debility, right? I'm debilitated. And what these terms really described was nervous system exhaustion. And when we look at the history of lion's mane, and we do think of it as the brain mushroom, and we'll touch on why it's so awesome for the brain and how it can impact the brain at a cellular level. But historically, lion's mane was used specifically for these conditions, for supporting this nervous system exhaustion, neurasthenia, debility.
Yeah. I love how the Western medical system comes up with fancy words for simple things. It's almost intentional to make us feel like we need doctors or we need someone else to teach us how to care for ourselves, where nervous system exhaustion is something we all can understand and most of us have felt at some point. And then we get to the word burnout, which is even more simplified. And then we get to the place where, because of social media and all the things, that word means something different. So I love bringing it all the way back to, it is actually a medical thing that had a medical name, and many of you listening are probably in it without even knowing that it might be called that. So when so many women say something like, I don't recognize myself, how many customers, how many clients, how many people in our community have said that to us? When we try to ask them to explain what's happening for them, that's all they can come up with. I just don't see me when I look in the mirror. And I want you to know that's not drama. That is biology.
Mhm.
And it has happened to women long before you and will continue to happen to women and people in general. But I think we're really talking about this hormonal transition. And I know, Dr. Desiree, you have clients that come to you specifically for this reason. I wonder if you would be willing to share a client story about burnout to give people a bit of context.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen this time and time again with patients who come in, no matter what age they are, whether they are in the perimenopausal stage of life or whether they're in undergrad and they're going through school, like you name it, I've seen it. And what I have seen in this burnout era right now with people is that we're living in a world where there is so much consumption, this overconsumption. And a lot of times it's these women, these moms who are coming in thinking that they actually need to do more and
Hmm.
do all of these things, add in more exercise, add in more this, more that. And they're really telling me this through tears.
Yeah.
They just want to rest. They just
Yeah.
want to hibernate. They just want to sit there and be
Hmm.
instead of do. And I see this all the time, and really you need to pause. Look at your
Yeah.
life and think, what are all these things that you're doing and who are you doing them for? And what can you do to
Yes.
fill your own cup? How are you expected to be all of the things for other people when you can't even be you for yourself?
Absolutely. And I think what hits home for me so much, again, the beginning of the mushroom journey for me was a quest for brain health because I was experiencing something that I couldn't put words to, but I knew wasn't right. And for me, I took an immunosuppressant to manage an autoimmune condition that started for me in a big hormonal shift in my life, came on for me just after puberty.
Mhm.
And as I headed toward the end of perimenopause and toward menopause, essentially just going back in reverse through puberty in reverse. And I think that's when I really started to understand that I was taking a pharmaceutical to suppress things that were showing up for me visually. For me, it was arthritis in my joints, psoriatic arthritis, and psoriasis on my skin. But I was having side effects from those things that I didn't want to experience. And as I came off of a pharmaceutical and added more food, of a wider diversity of food, and started to move my body, I was in a time I had had a seizure. I had had an MRI on my brain that told me that my brain didn't look good, and I was in fight or flight trying to get out of that state by doing so many things. So before I got to the state where I really feel like mushrooms made a change for me, not just in my brain health, but in my, like we're saying, nervous system health and all of that, it was really lucky. I feel like I was right at that stage where I was about to hit all the symptoms of perimenopause that could have hit me because I was just using pharmaceuticals to get through so I could do more.
Mhm.
And doing more was never going to get me where I needed to. So I just think it was such a gift. All the things that
Mhm.
happened to me along that health journey were
Mhm.
such a gift because it caused me to really stop and look in the mirror and say, I do not recognize this person because I'm not being me. And once I cleared out the noise from my life, learned to meditate, got still, used more food and less pharma, everything started to make sense and become clear for me. And around that same time, we have the genes for Alzheimer's dementia in our family. And we had done some genetic testing and discovered that this is a reality. And when you have some of these genes, dementia is not optional. It's going to come at some point. But I think what I learned in that research is And because I was working with, I was working with a neurologist who had looked at my brain. And when I asked, is that what we're seeing? He was able to explain so clearly to me, and I want you to hear this, audience, that Alzheimer's is a 100% preventable disease in the life expectancy that we can expect to have with today's science. So even the very few, I think today, I think there's, in last research I read, 60 million people worldwide have Alzheimer's. 70% of those people are women. Of those people, 95% of those cases are not related to genetics. So there are those 5% genetic cases where it's genetic and that's going to be it. But 95% of these cases were preventable. That
Mhm.
to me is, that's a lot, millions of people out there that could have done something if they had known what we know sooner. And it's that you have to intentionally protect your brain. You have to protect your brain from the time it's developed, which we know now is 30 years old. So until 30 years old, your brain is still developing. After 30 years old, it's your job to protect it from decline. And I wish I had started sooner. And I wish that I had known then what I know now. So today's episode is very much us sharing something with you that is close to home for both of us. Dr. Desiree has had some brain injury experiences through car accidents and concussion. I have a genetic predisposition and have had a seizure and had other, reasons because of side effects of pharmaceuticals. That doesn't matter what it is. If you are a woman, you are at risk for Alzheimer's. You are at risk for cognitive decline related to things that we don't have to experience if we are mindful of prevention. So that's my soapbox. That's something that just explains why we're so passionate, why we are
Mhm.
so passionate about this topic. So I
Mhm.
think, from there, I would love for you to just dive right in and tell us the basics about lion's mane mushrooms.
Yeah, lion's mane or Hericium erinaceus, which is the Latin name, it is one of the most researched medicinal mushrooms for the nervous system. And when you hear that, that might not register because we think of lion's mane for the brain. We think
Hmm.
lion's mane is the brain mushroom. We talk about the doctrine of signatures all the time. If you look at a photo of lion's mane, it looks like a brain.
Yeah.
And what the doctrine of signatures means is that there are things in nature that represent what they're good for. So
Yeah.
lion's mane is good for the brain based on research and it looks like the brain. So that's
Yeah.
that doctrine of signatures piece. And when we think of the nervous system, that is the brain and that is us and our emotional state. And when we look at lion's mane, some of these key properties is that it's neuroprotective. We know in research
Yes.
based on how it's modulating inflammation, it's immunomodulatory. That is protective for our brain. That's
Yes.
that's what we're looking at there. It is nootropic. It is anxiolytic and it has antidepressant-like effects. So helping with mood, anxiety, depression. These are some of the things that lion's mane does for our brain.
It's amazing. And I love that. Such an important thing to remind ourselves about what it doesn't do, because there's so much hype out there about lion's mane and it's in all these foods and, people are pixie dusting it into shampoo and lip gloss and ice cream, and it's all over the place. And they are talking about it stimulating the brain. And it doesn't stimulate, it doesn't push, it doesn't override. It supports repair. That's the preventative nature of it. And this is why it's so relevant for perimenopause, because this is a season that isn't about more stimulation, as you said so clearly. This is all about deeper nourishment. And I think of it the way that it looks in nature and the way it feels when we eat it. And we've both eaten it in a restaurant where it was prepared by celebrated chefs. It feels nourishing to me to eat it. When I take it in a capsule in the morning, I am telling myself that this is nourishment and that this is a time to look for deeper nourishment in all areas of our life. Lion's mane means that for me.
And one thing quickly that I want to add in, because somebody listening might hear you say perimenopause and think it's not relevant for you.
Mm,
Perimenopause, it fluctuates. I mean, it can start anywhere as early as 35 years old.
yeah,
And it can go to, 50, sometimes 50 plus. It depends. Perimenopause is essentially that change in hormone, those change in hormones before menopause. So there
yeah,
is a shift for us as women. But when we look at lion's mane, like there is a clear reason why it is continuing to show up in studies around anxiety, in depression, and in quality of life. And there's one in particular that I do want to bring up. It's this study in 2010 by Nagano. He's the main researcher. And it was this randomized, double-blind, placebo-controlled trial. And they looked at menopausal women. And they found that lion's mane reduced depression and anxiety scores. It also helped to improve quality of life. And they measured this using particular scores for these patients that were participating in this. And I think that's something that can give us some reverence for changing our mind, changing our mood, changing our brain
Yes.
and our quality of life.
Yes, especially when doctors will say, there's no research on that, which has been said to me and to almost all of my friends.
Yeah.
Oh, my doctor doesn't know about me taking mushrooms to help with these symptoms because there's no research. And where did they get that idea that there is no research when, and I'm nerdy, I will tell you, I was on PubMed this morning. I searched the term medicinal mushrooms for another presentation that you and I are doing, and there were 7,875 papers on medicinal mushrooms. So it deserves some reverence, and I think it's time for us to change that story. And what really stands out for me in that these were not extreme interventions, right?
Mhm.
This was nourishment changing the terrain in these studies. These were not people being given
Yeah.
pharmaceuticals and put through all kinds of crazy lab tests. They just added nourishment. And then
Yeah.
we looked at results
Yeah.
on
They added it
women who
on
are
women.
so underrepresented in research.
So
So I love when
underrepresented.
you get mushrooms and women in a clinical trial that is double blind and placebo controlled. It makes my heart so happy.
Yeah, and there's this other case study I wanna bring up too from 2014, and I think it's really fascinating. So, this case study was on recurrent depressive disorder, and they found that supplementation with lion's mane extract improved the person's quality of life enough that tricyclic antidepressant medication was actually discontinued.
Ugh,
So, this
hallelujah. That's success.
it is success. And what I will say here is that this doesn't mean that lion's mane is a replacement for medication. What it means is that the nervous system was finally supported
Mm,
where the individual felt that they could initiate a discontinuation of a pharmaceutical with the guidance of their healthcare team.
yes. This is where lion's mane becomes truly fascinating because something big is happening there. Something big is happening when consumption of a medicinal mushroom is causing enough change for you in your nervous system regulation that you can make life-changing decisions to delete some things from your life that might not have been addressing a root cause to begin with. Can you tell us about the compounds, the science, the
Mhm.
chemistry, the nerdy stuff about what was actually going on there?
So, something that is important for us to know about lion's mane is that it contains two unique compounds, and these two compounds are areas that are studied in research. So, the
Mhm.
two compounds are hericenones and erinacines. So, these two compounds are neurotrophic, but what I do want to do is distinguish between the two because
Mhm.
hericenones are present in the fruiting body of lion's mane. So products like ours, which are fruiting body extracts. Erinacines are present in the mycelium of lion's mane. So
Mhm.
they won't be present in our products just because we don't have any mycelium in ours.
And
And
important to note, the erinacines are not present in grain. They're
yes,
present in the mycelium, and most products that you're buying on the market today that will say they're mycelium are
yes,
actually myceliated grain. And current research tells us that in that product, you've got about 90% grain and 10% mycelium. So the
yes.
erinacines are going to be a very small fraction of 10% of what's in that product. So
Yeah.
this is why we use a fruiting body only product, because the hericenones, which have been researched and are present in the fruiting body, we're only using the fruiting body. There's no
Yeah.
other filler, we would call it, in there. So when we look at research, both are valid, but the erinacines, we would have to be growing the mycelium in a bioreactor, in a liquid broth, essentially, outside of a grain that it could be entwined into so that we could pull the mycelium out and then work with it. And this is brand new science. We don't have those products on the market. So be careful if you are reading and something is promoting erinacines from lion's mane for brain health, and then you buy a mycelium on grain product and think you're getting that. You're not getting that, or you're not getting enough of that to be relevant to the research that we're showing. So I know that's mushroom nerdiness, but I think it's such an important thing for people
Yep.
to be educated about where their dollars are going, because you are always voting with your dollars. And if you're going to vote with your dollars, please do it on things that are scientifically verified.
Totally. And it's hard, honestly, to decipher because not all companies out there and not all products, just in general with food and supplements, it's not easy to decipher. So I think that's really important that you mentioned that. Okay, going back to the haricinones and
Hmm.
these compounds that are present in lion's mane, I do want to explain clearly what it means. So
Hmm.
haricinones, these are compounds unique to lion's mane that are neurotrophic. What does neurotrophic mean? Neurotrophic means that it supports the growth and repair of nerve cells in our brain, throughout our body. It also supports BDNF. You've probably heard us say that before, brain-derived neurotrophic factor. So supporting the growth and repair of nerve cells, this factor, which they've shown in research, helps with stress resilience, helps with mood, and helps with cognition, and specifically where it's impacting the brain in specific areas. It's also been shown to increase NGF, which is nerve growth factor. So
Hmm.
nerve growth factor, it's pretty
Hmm.
self-explanatory that it's helping with nerve health and regeneration. So we can think of lion's mane as this brain fertilizer because of the
Yes.
components, these compounds that are present in a good quality extract. So we looked at this one study that is available on PubMed. It's from 2021, and they looked at compounds like isohoricerenol A, and they found that isohoricerenol A from lion's mane extract promotes neurite growth. So basically what that means is brain cell communication.
That's everything you need to hear today, people. You have 87 billion neurons in your brain.
Yeah.
87 billion neurons in your brain is what the most current neuroscience we can look at tells us. We have got to take care of them like little babies. They each have somewhere between 5 and 10,000 connections on them, and they're just reaching out. So when Dr. Desiree says neurite outgrowth, we have to think of these trees with branches growing off of them looking to communicate. That's what they're there for. This is all to do with brain cell communication. And when we have brain cells communicate better, everything improves. Your mood improves. Your memory improves. Your emotional regulation is better because this is such a massive part of who we are, of our identity. There's a difference between your brain and your mind, and I know this, and we could get nerdy and woo-woo and talk about the soul being who you are. But the fact is you're living in this body. It is what's carrying you around in this lifetime. And I think because we can't see the brain, we assume that it just knows what to do. But the truth is we have to be as mindful of it as we are building the bicep. When we build our bicep, we see it. And I think it's important for us to say, too, exercise is probably the best thing you can do for your brain. We're not saying, take lion's mane and sit around and do nothing. Nothing is going to be great exercise. And today we know that has to be lifting heavy weights is also going to be great for your brain cells. But everything that we can do to support it. So if you're just exercising and then you're eating a terrible diet and never sleeping, you're one of those people headed for dementia at some point. If we are going to be covering all of the bases, the things that we put in our mouth can be so beneficial for us. And lion's mane is one of those things. Think about the calories that we consume in a day. And when we think about what we're putting in, 20% of what we eat is being used by the brain. 20%. So it's this little organ on the big mass of what is our body, but it needs so much nourishment. And when we choose what that nourishment is, we are really supporting these things that show up for us as symptoms of perimenopause, menopause, mood, memory, and emotional regulation. What woman isn't talking to us about that? So I love how that study really showed what's happening. The compounds are helping us to support those 87 billion neurons that are just trying to be healthy and make you you.
And I want to piggyback on everything that you just said. Two things. One is that when we think of lion's mane as a brain fertilizer, if you have a plant, you don't just add fertilizer. You also
Right.
add water. It needs sunlight. It's like that's a simple
Yes.
analogy to describe what you just said, that you can't just take lion's mane and expect your brain to be amazing. And
Yes.
you need to do all of these other things that promote health, wellness, well-being. The other
Yes.
thing that I will say that's really important, and we actually didn't touch on, especially with haricinones, that needs to be said, they are only present if the lion's mane
Mm.
extract is a dual extract.
Yes.
So when we say extract, it's what we mean is it's gone through this process where there's a hot water extraction process, but it also needs to go through a second extraction process with alcohol. And the reason being is because there are compounds that are both water soluble and alcohol soluble. And if we do a hot water extraction, we're only going to get the water soluble compounds like polysaccharides, which have a wealth of information if you go on
Mhm.
PubMed and you can research on that,
Yeah,
and
a
great
different
for gut
episode.
health.
We have episodes about that, like the immune system and gut health benefits of the
Yeah.
water-soluble beta-glucans. Amazing, but that's
Yes.
not this episode, so I love that you're pointing this out. Carry on.
Yeah, yeah. So the alcohol soluble compounds like haricinones, when we look in research, it's these alcohol soluble compounds that are showing promise for nervous system support and brain health support. So that's why it's important with lion's mane. And we stress this so much and we get on our
Yeah.
soapbox about lion's mane. And I think it's because we have this personal connection to it with our own brain health story. And we want to make sure that if you are intending to take lion's mane to support all of the things that we've talked about in this episode, you want to make sure that you're voting with your dollars and actually taking a good quality product that is a
Mhm.
dual extract so that haricinones can be present.
Yeah, and people will ask, "Well, how do I know?" It should be on the label. It should be on the label that it's fruiting body only. It should be on the label that it's an extract. It should be on the label that it's a dual extract. It should be on the label that it's organic, because one of the worst things you can do for your brain is add pesticides, environmental toxins, which we aren't sure of when products aren't organic. So
Mhm.
it's all about transparency and really education. It's about education, which thank God we all have big brains out there right now, that you have the ability to educate yourself. And we hope we can be helpful with that. We hope we can be clear about how to make those choices, even if it's not about buying products that we are connected to. This relates to all products. There's really no excuse for ignorance with what information is available to us anymore. And you do need discernment when you're looking through research or reviews or things. But reading those labels and expecting companies to be transparent today is not outside of reasonability. We need to be, as companies, responsible for sharing as much as we can and making sure that things are scientifically verified and we have certificates of analysis available to the public. That's what part of what you're paying for. It's not just that capsule's organic and that the excipients used to put it in the capsule were very mindfully chosen and that the product is the highest quality it can be. It's also everything that goes around behind it, including what's on that label and not on that label. Testing is expensive. That's why companies don't do it. But you need it to be done so that you're not just wasting your money taking something that's not going to do all of this great stuff it can do when you're sure you've got the right thing, the thing that was used in the research. So dual extract lion's mane if you're looking for brain health, non-negotiable.
And okay, so let's link back with what we're talking about with chronic stress and the
Mhm.
brain, and because we've just talked about how lion's mane can support cognition, can support mood. And I just want to ask a question for you who's listening. If you are somebody who feels like they have brain fog, I want you to ask yourself if you think that you're chronically stressed. Because when things
Mm.
come back into balance and when you start to nourish your body from a place where you were chronically stressed, that's
Mhm.
typically where mental clarity will come in. Okay, so we've talked about that. A big piece as well is energy, because energy needs to be supported for a lot of people, and even for those who are in perimenopause and those who are burned out in general. It's important
Yeah.
that we feel energized so that we can have the energy to be ourselves and do the things that light us up. That's the purpose of life.
Yeah. Yeah. The word energy is thrown around in so many ways these days, and we all want more of it. And lion's mane is anti-fatigue, not stimulating. So I think a
Mhm.
lot of people, when they hear us talk about cordyceps mushrooms, they think of that being stimulating and providing endurance and stamina. Lion's mane is different than that. Being anti-fatigue does not mean stimulating. So it does improve resilience for us. It supports our metabolic health, and it's anti-hyperglycemic, and it has lipid modulating action. So the way it's working with the good fats in our body. So when we look at it through traditional Chinese medicine or as an herbalist, traditionally, we will see that these professionals will talk about it nourishing the 5 internal organs. And I think this is the kind of energy where, in layman's terms, you're not going to crash later. You're not
Mhm.
going to do that heavy crashing that people will experience at 3 p.m. and then go for the cup of coffee to get out of that sense. And I know so many women are living
Mhm.
in that state during perimenopause because you can't just stop doing your job. You can't just stop being a mom. You can't just stop being a caregiver for who you're caring for. And when that crash hits, it's a good indicator of where your nervous system might be, about how balanced your systems in general are, about how happy your organs are. And I think if lion's mane can prevent us from having that crash in the day and not drink the caffeine, there are so many downstream good things that
Mhm.
happen. And you've talked about consuming caffeine at that 3 p.m. slump so often and about why it's not the answer. But can you just do a quick review for those in the audience that aren't, up on their caffeine
Mhm.
science right now? Because I just come to it so many times driving in the truck on our way to somewhere on a road trip, and it's so tempting to pull over at Starbucks at 3:30 and have something with caffeine in it because, you're excited to get to your destination and not be sleepy when you get there, or you don't want to fall asleep while driving or what have you. So give us a bit of the science around caffeine.
Yeah. Okay. So caffeine has a half life of 8 hours. So what that means is if you have a cup of coffee at 2 o'clock,
Mhm,
8 hours later, your body has only metabolized 50% of that. So at 10 o'clock, your body has only metabolized half of that at 10 o'clock. And some people go to bed at 9 and you still have caffeine metabolites within your body. So your body's working through that. And then we continue that because typically our caffeine consumption overlaps
mhm,
with the processing time of our body to metabolize it. And that's where this caffeine dependence comes in. That's where these burnout cycles come in because now people are increasing the amount of caffeine consumption, but
mhm.
the caffeine hit just isn't hitting anymore or isn't
That's
hitting
it.
as good
It
in
is a
that
drug.
sense. It is a drug, right? You're having a cup of coffee and you think, oh, I actually am not as alert, stimulated, energized from this cup of coffee. I need more. And
Mhm.
then you're having a larger crash when
Yeah.
you are coming down from caffeine. So that's really where that cycle happens. And it's happened to me too. There was a time in undergrad where I consumed a lot more caffeine than a regulated and grounded self would now at this age.
Yeah,
And it
medical school
happened.
is not it's so ironic that physicians in general do so many things in order to become the incredible humans they end up being by making decisions that they would never recommend to a patient. The sleep deprivation of a physician when they're going through residency, or you
Yeah.
going through medical school to be a naturopathic physician and drinking, I'm going to tell the audience, some
Yeah.
quad shots.
Yeah.
Here and there. And I mean, you feel that in your body in a
Yeah.
way that your body's telling you something. Caffeine is a drug, and I'm not downplaying it. I mean, I'm not a coffee drinker, but I did drink coffee this week with my husband because he loves it so much. And I wanted to share that love with him to remind myself that I am a fast metabolizer of caffeine. I feel it intensely and quickly in my body. And I know for sure if I want a great night's sleep, I do have to think about when I would consume it. And I'm going to get my caffeine from matcha, a little less than coffee, but it's still there. And we're
Mhm.
not saying, when I say it's a drug, that doesn't mean bad to me. I think you just have to understand your relationship with it. And do you have a healthy relationship with caffeine? And to choose that, coffee has so many great benefits, we know now. It has heart protective benefits, and there's so many great things. But it does have science. The fact that
Mhm.
it has a half-life of 8 hours is something I want you to fire and wire into your brain and remember every time you're choosing to have a cup. Why am I choosing it? when am I choosing it, and what will the effects be for future me when I consume it? And if we can get that down and not be, living through med school on quad shots, I think that, again, your sleep's going to be better. And then there's the domino effect of all things. And that means people might need an alternative. What are we going to do instead? And if you can be putting some lion's mane into an herbal tea or taking some lion's mane capsules and getting through the midday slump without using the caffeine there, then you just enjoy it better when you wake up in the morning because your body doesn't have any on board. And then you're not getting into this burnout cycle you're talking about.
Definitely. And
I love
on the
that. Okay.
record, I'm going to say quad shots. Don't do it. Don't do it. This was not a regular occurrence, but it's interesting. A very young version of me in undergrad could metabolize it much better than a very depleted naturopathic medical school me, where it was a very different experience. And that just shows burnout and stress cycles. So don't do it.
And maturity. And maturity. All right. So let's talk about sleep and anxiety and this wired, tired loop that goes on. So burnout sleep isn't insomnia in the traditional sense, right? It is a nervous system that can't downshift. And there is research on this, and there is research connected to lion's mane on this. So there were actually 2 studies. So there was a study done in 2015, and it was a pilot clinical trial. It used a small sample of synchronicities, female undergraduate students, which I think is double cool because A, more research on women. Yes, we're trying to pull that out for you. And that these were undergrad students, which Dr. Des and I both at one time were. And they did research on these women for 4 weeks. And participants using lion's mane showed improvements in sleep quality and subjective well-being. So there were indications of reduced anxiety for these women and reduced insomnia symptoms. And it did this because it increased a salivary marker. So they were looking at salivary-free MHPG, which is a marker that is linked to noradrenaline activity in the body and the stress response. So these effects suggest that the lion's mane could help to balance stress and improve mood and sleep patterns. And although it was small, it still sets us up for, we always say we need more research. Well, the truth is, people in the mushroom industry are never going to have the funding that pharmaceutical industry participants have. And huge randomized clinical trials on mushrooms are never going to be something that we can afford here at Eversio Wellness. But I love that that study is enough that it is a human clinical trial. They did do a month's worth of research. We know what the lion's mane supplementation looked like. It was a good one. And it was associated with better sleep and better mood. And this suggests this powerful potential benefit for stress and well-being by just consuming a mushroom. I love it so much.
And I do want to clarify as well this MHPG, these increased levels of free MHPG for more clarity for people. So this is like an indirect marker of central nervous system and noradrenic or norepinephrine activity, and really the metabolism of norepinephrine. So when there are high levels, that sometimes can indicate stress, but this optimal or appropriately increased level of this free MHPG during and immediately after a stressor, it can indicate a more regulated or responsive nervous system, because what it's showing is that the body is actively metabolizing and clearing norepinephrine rather than allowing it to build up, which suggests a healthy capacity for turnover. So I think that's important for people to understand the context of that. And
thank you for explaining that. People understanding why they are feeling a certain way. I mean, I think we've all felt nervous system dysregulation, and it probably feels very different for everyone, and people will describe it as anxiety. But when we've all heard of adrenaline and epinephrine. When I say those words, we know what it feels like to have an adrenaline rush, right? We understand what that hormone can feel like in our body. So when you explain that the body's trying to regulate that for you all of the time, and when we can do things that help to regulate it or get rid of what we don't need or add more of what we do need, I think it helps us when we're in the moment to know it's okay. My body makes these things and it's doing its best, and I'm doing something to support it by doing something like supplementing.
Yeah, and a take home here is that lion's mane isn't sedating. It's helping your nervous system regulate. And we
Yeah.
we look back to these outcomes from these studies where there were reduced insomnia trends from taking something like lion's mane. It's not something
Yeah.
we maybe would have thought about,
Yeah.
lion's mane for sleep, but it's showing that it can reduce insomnia trends. And it's shown in research, especially from that study that you mentioned, that there was better sleep during high stress periods.
Yes. Which,
So
hello, undergrad students. There's going to
totally.
be times in our life when we do that, and it's going to come again in perimenopause, and it's still going to be there in menopause, I can tell you. And I
Mhm,
love that the line to remember is sleep returns when the body feels safe again. And
mhm,
however you're going to get there, there's so many things you can do. Having a great workout in the day, making sure you got sunlight in your eyes in the morning. We've said them all 1,000 times, but we always talk about reishi with sleep. So I love that you're explaining the science behind also lion's mane. And I have been tempted to take it at night more often over the past few years because something different is experienced. And the two together, they're always better together. There are going to be synergies. So we're not saying stop taking reishi for sleep. We're saying if reishi's not enough or not doing it and we add lion's mane to that, what does that picture look like? And then we have things like the 5 mushroom blend, where of course now you've got reishi and lion's mane in there together with other hormonal supportive compounds and other mushrooms. So it's all intentional. So let's
mhm.
make this practical.
Yep.
The research backed ranges in all of these studies that we talked to you about today, if we were looking at maintenance, we'd be looking at taking between 2 and 5 grams a day. One of our capsules gives you 4 grams quantity crude equivalent. If you're looking at taking a therapeutic dose because there's a greater indication there for you, I would be looking at least those 4 grams. If you take 2 of our capsules, you're getting 8. That would be a therapeutic dose. And according to Health Canada, you need to stay under 12 grams a day, quantity crude equivalent. So that's of dried whole mushroom extract. And safety wise, people always ask us, can I take too much? Well, it's a mushroom. These are food. It's non toxic, even at higher doses. We just know that you're going to hit a ceiling eventually where there's no further benefit from taking more. It's just costing you more money. So starting at a capsule a day is a great maintenance dose. If you're someone that just wants to love on those 87 billion neurons up in your brain, trying to stay healthy and alive and make your mood the best it can be and help your memory be the best it can be and help your sleep be the best it can be.
Definitely. Consistency is key, and we can really think of lion's mane as this nervous system nourishment,
Yes.
nourishment for the brain, not a quick fix. And if you
Yeah.
are listening and you're thinking at any point during this episode, you've thought, this is me, because I think I can speak for Brandy as well as myself, that there were versions of ourselves that came true in this episode, and it hit close to home and it resonated. So if
Yeah.
at any point you've been listening and thinking, oh, that's me, I want you to know that this is a great opportunity for you to get better. Your
Yeah.
body isn't broken. There's nothing wrong with you. This is an opportunity for you to be a better version of yourself. And it's more information for you to think, how can I improve my life?
Yes, I love that. Your body's not broken. Your body is adapting. It's always going to try to do that. Your body and brain are always going to try to bring you back into homeostasis. That's what the autonomic nervous system is. It is this regulating system always trying to bring you back. It's going to create stress for you when you need it because that's part of survival. And as the minute you experience stress, the stress response is you coming back from it. So your whole body is always adapting and it deserves support that matches the season you're in. So if you are a perimenopausal or menopausal woman listening to this and you're experiencing something that you haven't been able to get after yet, you haven't been able to move the needle, maybe it's your brain that needs more attention, and lion's mane would be the mushroom for that.
Lion's Mane offers a way to support burnout recovery, energy, sleep, and brain health all at the root. So you don't need to do more. Your nervous system needs nourishment.
And that's all for today, friends. We are sending you so much love and light, and we can't wait to see you next time. Remember to, whatever platform you're listening this on, please go and follow us on that. Subscribe to the channel and tune in for more heartfelt education, nerdy mushroomness from the two of us. And until then, we will see you next time.
See you next time. Be well.
We hope that you learned something new here today. If anyone you know could benefit from what we shared in this episode, please share it with them. And if you're interested in adding mushrooms to your life, then you can use code PODCAST15 to save 15% on your entire order at EversioWellness.com.
If you haven't yet left us a rating and review, subscribed to this podcast, or followed our social media accounts listed in the show notes, we would so appreciate that. And if you're not sure where to start, you can take our Mushroom Wellness quiz. Thank you so much for sharing this moment with us. Until next time, be well.